It's a tough one today. As we take a deep dive into this plane crash in the Philippines,
Yeah,
February 6th, 2025,
right.
a U.S. military contracted surveillance plane crashed in a rice field. All four on board lost their lives.
Tragic.
Yeah, and we know that one of those lost was a U.S. service member, and the other three were defense contractors. So our condolences go out to the families, obviously, dealing with a loss like that.
Absolutely. It's a harsh reminder, isn't it? The risks that are just inherent in these kinds of missions, surveillance. I mean, you're often talking about specialized aircraft, you're talking about needing highly skilled personnel
Yeah.
to operate in, let's be honest, challenging and often dangerous environments.
It makes you think, what kind of plane are we even talking about here? And what does a typical surveillance mission even look like? I mean, maybe you can shed some light on that for our listener.
Sure. So we don't have the specifics on this particular aircraft, but it was likely a smaller, more agile plane, designed for reconnaissance. These missions, they can involve anything from aerial photography to electronic monitoring, gathering information, basically, stuff that's vital for, well, assessing threats, informing military strategy.
And the article mentioned that this mission was specifically at the request of the Philippine government. So, I mean, that really kind of underscores the whole complex web of international relations, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the U.S. has a long history of military presence in the Philippines. It goes back decades. And a key aspect of that whole relationship has been support,
Yeah.
supporting the Philippines in their fight, the ongoing fight against these various militant groups. It's a delicate balance, providing support while also acknowledging, hey, American lives are potentially at risk here.
Yeah. And it's easy to forget about that risk when you just read headlines.
Yeah.
These are real people with families and lives outside of their service.
You're right. And it's sad to say that this tragedy isn't an isolated event. I mean, just recently, a small plane crash in Brazil claimed 2 lives. And right now, there's a search still going on for a missing plane in Alaska.
Right.
These events, even though they're not directly related, they really do underscore the inherent danger of aviation, particularly in remote areas or tough terrains.
Yeah, and while we don't know the exact cause of this crash in the Philippines, it's safe to say that things like weather conditions, potential mechanical issues, even just human error, these are possibilities that investigators will be looking at really closely.
They will, yeah. Precisely. And even though, statistically aviation is quite safe, it's these types of incidents that remind us all, right, about the importance of vigilance, continuous vigilance, and constant efforts to improve safety measures.
It's heartbreaking to think about. And even that detail about the water buffalo that was also killed in the crash, it just adds another layer of sadness to the whole thing.
It does, yeah.
It reminds us that these tragedies have these ripple effects that, extend beyond what we see immediately.
It's a very poignant detail. It speaks to those unintended consequences, right,
Mhm.
that can come out of these types of events. And I think it's crucial for us to remember that even amidst the focus on the human cost, the human lives lost, there's this wider impact on the environment, on the surrounding communities.
And even though these events are deeply tragic, they also underscore the bravery and sacrifice of all those serving in these capacities.
Right.
It's a reminder that there are people out there putting their lives on the line every day, often far from home.
Yeah,
And the work they do has very real consequences.
it does. It certainly does. These aren't abstract concepts. There's a profound human cost. And it's important, I think, to consider the context here, the specific context of the Philippines.
Right. Because the article, it touches upon the fact that the U.S. has had this military presence in the Philippines for decades now,
Yeah.
largely to help them in their fight against, local militants. So this wasn't just some random mission. This was part of a much bigger, much longer-term strategy.
It was. It absolutely was. And the U.S.-Philippines relationship, well, it has a deep and some might say complicated history. I mean, it's intertwined with colonialism, military interventions, ongoing political ties, economic ties. It's complex. And this recent crash, it kind of brings all that back into the light, the continued presence of the U.S. military in the region and this persistent fight against terrorism, which is a huge concern for the Philippines.
Yeah, it's like this crash, in a way, peels back this layer and you see this whole network of alliances, conflicts, shared histories. I mean, what can we even learn from this incident about what's happening in the region right now?
It suggests definitely that the threat from these militant groups, it's real, it's ongoing. It requires continued support from the U.S., and it also highlights, really, the Philippines' reliance on the U.S. for security, which, of course, has its pros and cons. I mean, some would argue it creates dependency. Others see it as this vital partnership necessary for stability in a, let's face it, volatile region.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's heavy stuff to think about. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but we got to remember the human cost of these conflicts. We're talking about people, families, communities deeply affected by all of this.
You're absolutely right. And the impact on the Filipino people themselves, it's crucial. They're caught in the middle, right? And the presence of foreign troops, well, it can be a source of both comfort and tension. There's no easy answer.
The article doesn't get into specifics about the type of surveillance this plane was doing, but it does mention providing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support. What does that even mean? Can you break that down?
Basically, it's about gathering information. That's the core of it. And these missions, they could involve things like aerial photography, electronic monitoring, maybe even intercepting communications. And all that data, it serves a lot of different purposes. It can track militant activity, assess threats, inform military strategy. It's a lot.
It's like piecing together this massive puzzle, but with insanely high stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And it requires a lot of skill, a lot of expertise. These crews, they're highly trained professionals analyzing huge amounts of data, trying to provide, actionable intelligence, stuff that can actually be used.
And the fact that this plane was there at the request of the Philippine government, it adds another layer to this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It shows that these operations, they're often done with other countries, requiring a lot of diplomacy, coordination behind the scenes.
Absolutely. It speaks to the delicate nature of these partnerships. The U.S., they need to balance their own interests, their own strategic interests, with the needs and concerns of their allies. And navigating that, it can be incredibly challenging.
It's this constant balancing act, isn't it? Trying to support your allies, maintain stability in a region, protect your own interests, all while knowing the risks involved.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's a balance that's always shifting, always changing. It requires careful diplomacy, strategic thinking, and a willingness to adapt because circumstances change.
So where does all this leave us? What are the big takeaways from this tragedy in the Philippines?
Well, I think it underscores the complexities of international relations, the ever-present threat of terrorism, and the sacrifices made by those involved in these operations. It's a lot to absorb.
And it's a real reminder, a stark reminder of the risks that are just built into military aviation, even in quote-unquote peacetime.
You're absolutely right. And it really emphasizes the importance of, robust safety protocols, thorough investigations to find out why these accidents happen, and constant effort to mitigate the risks, to protect those who serve. It's an ongoing process.
We talked earlier about the other recent plane crashes, the one in Brazil. The ongoing search for that plane in Alaska, it just amplifies that feeling, that vulnerability, the risks that come with air travel.
It's true. Well, statistically, aviation is very safe. These incidents, they remind us of the potential dangers, the importance of vigilance, the need for constant safety improvements. It can never be perfect.
And it's so important to acknowledge the human element here. The families, the friends, those who lost loved ones in these tragedies, they're dealing with unimaginable grief.
They are. And behind all the headlines, all the geopolitical analysis, there are real people.
Yeah.
Real people whose lives are forever changed by these events. And we can't lose sight of that.
It's a reminder, isn't it? Even in a world that feels so impersonal, so disconnected sometimes, we are all connected. These tragedies, they ripple outward. They affect not just those involved directly, but their communities, the wider world.
Yeah, it really does. It kind of underscores that shared humanity,
Yeah.
and the importance of empathy, compassion when these things happen.
Yeah. For those of us not directly involved, how can we even, how can we honor the memory of those lost? Support those grieving? What can we even do?
It starts with awareness, I think. Understanding, learning about these events, talking about them thoughtfully, seeking out different perspectives. It all helps us grasp the complexity of what's going on.
And it's about recognizing those sacrifices made, right?
Yeah.
By those who serve. Military, civilian, it doesn't matter. Supporting organizations that help veterans, help their families.
Exactly. And pushing for policies, policies that prioritize things like diplomacy, conflict resolution, finding peaceful solutions. Because ultimately, honoring their memory means working towards a world where these tragedies, they just happen less.
That's well said.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process, I gotta say. But it feels important to have these conversations, to try to make sense of these events, learn from them.
It is, and it's crucial to remember these aren't just isolated incidents. They fit into a bigger picture, a narrative about global security, international relations, the human cost of conflict. It's all connected.
Yeah. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all,
Yeah.
But I find it inspiring in a way to see the courage, the dedication of those who put themselves in harm's way to protect others. It's
It
remarkable.
is a testament to the human spirit, isn't it? That capacity for selflessness, sacrifice. And even in the darkest times, there's that reminder. There are people out there striving to make a difference, to make things better.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listener today?
I'd say this. In a world that often feels so divided, so full of conflict, it's vital to remember that shared humanity. These tragedies, they remind us, life's fragile. We need to cherish those we love, appreciate those who serve, and work towards a world that's more peaceful, more just, for everyone.
It's a powerful message,
Yeah.
and one that really resonates, I think. So thank you for helping us navigate these complex topics. It's not easy stuff.
It's been my pleasure. These conversations are crucial, and I applaud you for creating this space, for thoughtful reflection, meaningful dialogue. It's needed.
And to our listener, we know this was a tough one. But as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care, and we'll see you next time.